Hello, everybody. Welcome to Maryanne Live. I'm Maryanne Comaroto. We are so glad you are here today. Are you a parent? Are you a free-range parent? You don't know what that means, though. It's actually funny, and later on it will be very funny when we introduce our guest, Wendy Aronsson, who's written a book, Refeathering the Empty Nest. That's what we're talking about today. Are you an empty nester? Are you a child of an empty nester? Have you caused someone to have an empty nest? Are you about to have an empty nest? This is that time of the year, at least here on the planet Earth, where so many kids are graduating from college and other places. Depending on where you're at in your lineup with your children, you're going to want to join us this hour. And for those of you who are about to be empty nesters, maybe not this year, maybe in a couple of years, or what about you folks who are, I don't know, maybe you're pregnant and you're thinking, oh, God, I can't even think about that now. Well, you know what, some of your friends are probably going to be able to use this advice. So no matter where you fall on the spectrum, stay with us this hour. But before we start thinking about the empty nest, let's dial our attention back for just a moment. As most of you know, I'm a relationship activist, and I love inviting folks to bring their attention back to themselves. I think it's a great place for us to start no matter what we do. And at the beginning of this program, I like to start by inviting us to take an audible breath. Yes, bringing conscious awareness to your breathing pattern. It seems so simple and maybe even, I don't know, crunchy, as some people say, or woo-woo. Try it out. Listen to the sound of your own self. Give yourself a gift of your own attention for just a moment and notice the difference. I know my shoulders are halfway up to my earlobes. I can feel it. Bringing breath to your body helps you relax. Come back in your body. It will make the program more enjoyable. Actually, adding conscious breathing to about anything you do is not only free. Ooh, I say that and I worry. God, could we sell air? Oh, I hope not. We can't sell our own breath, at least not at this point. I know water is not free in most places, but breath so far is still free, and you get to choose. For those of us who are lucky enough to breathe in and out, sitting up today in an upright position, go ahead and give yourself the gift of your own attention. I'm watching you, Wendy. I can see. I'm watching Wendy, our guest. Is she holding her breath? Are you holding your breath? How are you breathing? Just pay attention and notice. And at the release of that exhale, let's go down our list of folks who make this program possible. My gratitude list, while you're going down your gratitude list as well. Who makes it possible for you to do what you're doing right now? This is a very important inquiry. It's as important as breath. We need each other. We don't do what we do without each other. The chair that you're sitting on, the car that you're driving, whatever you ate this morning, involved a myriad of people totally devoted to helping us do what we do every day, the unsung heroes of our lives. My list is long. I'm sure yours is too. Go ahead and make your way down a little bit of it. I'm feeling a little cranky today, so I love my gratitude list. It helps me kind of get out of that kind of crotchety space that we can kind of find ourselves in. So a couple of folks who make it possible for us to do what we do, the National Action Organization, helping change the way we value each other here in the United States. Check them out online, naction.org. They've got lots of programs, and this one in particular, 100% of the proceeds goes towards programs like this. Also, the Open Secret Bookstore in San Rafael, California, for 7 years they've been sponsoring this program. Bookstores, as a lot of us who are authors know, are, I don't know, they're falling on the wayside, right? Most things are happening online, but there's a lot of us who like to go into bookstores. We like to walk in, we like the ritual of touching. We actually like to be around other people. we like it might be an illusion, I don't know. Some people say there is no such thing as space and time. Well, that's nice for you. For me, I like going into a bookstore, touching the book, seeing the different designs on the covers, being drawn one way or the other. You never know who you're going to meet in Open Secret Bookstore, by the way. And they've got a great vegetarian cuisine. I've been hanging out there for Gosh, I don't even want to tell you how long. It's double digits. It's in the twos, maybe, oh, I don't know, maybe 30 years now. My goodness, it's been a really long time. Yes, you can find books like our guest today, Wendy Aronsson's book. I'm going to hold it up for those of you who are watching us streaming live. If you're listening and you don't know that we're streaming live now, you can get online on your handheld device, on your smartphone, on your iPhone, on your iPad, and you can watch Wendy and I this hour talking about empty nesting. Join in the fun by watching if you're a visual type, and we will be rebroadcasting, I can say that, on MaryanneLive as well. You can re-listen to the program and re-watch or just watch for the first time. Go to MaryanneLive.com for more information. Okay, we have been breathing. We are feeling some modicum of gratitude. Is it gone already? Come on, you can get it back. And now we're going to talk about our topic for today, empty nesting. I don't know so many folks who do not know what that means, but for your review, when the children have flown the coop, whether they've left because of school, they left because they just needed to go. I mean, there are a lot of circumstances under which you have an empty nest. Typically, kids go off to school, they grow up, and they move along. And suddenly you find yourself, whether you're in a relationship or single or whatever kind of family dynamic that you have, sometimes there are many parents. Suddenly the kids are gone and things change. Well, that's what Wendy Aronsson has written a book about, and she's here to tell us about it, Refeathering the Empty Nest. Let me tell you a little bit about Wendy and what you can expect this hour. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book first. Free-range parents, I love, and adore that thought, like free-range chickens. You're looking around at your clean, neat, empty house and wondering, what now? Well, Wendy Aronsson focuses on the shift, a phase that represents a profound change from the daily rigors of constant parenting to a period of self-reflection and reorientation. She uses real-life stories to show how people have managed these changes and how they've reignited the passion in their marriages, and in some cases moved on from bad relationships and rediscovered old talents and interests. Tune in today with us, and we will be taking you on a journey, guiding you, whether your nest is about to be empty, your baby birds have already taken flight, or wherever you find yourself in the process. And Wendy, don't you know, she's a licensed psychotherapist, and I have to ring a bell for that. This is no easy thing to do and be. A lot of schooling, thousands of hours of training, people supervising you over the years, and then launching out into the world of people, years and years, and listening to thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of hours of stories. Wendy has been there for us. She's had our backs, listening, paying attention, and then one day decided, you know what? My house is going to be empty pretty soon. We're going to talk to her a little bit about how she went from being a psychotherapist to a superstar empty nester expert here on MaryanneLive. We're so happy to have you here, Wendy. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. Now, you're on the East Coast, right?
Yes, I am, in Connecticut.
Okay, so empty nesting on the East Coast is pretty similar to it is on the West Coast, right?
I suspect so, yes.
A little bit different weather pattern, so, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's hot today, for sure. Wendy, talk a little bit about what is empty nesting by your appraisal. A lot of us think we have an idea what it means. What do you think it means?
Well, actually, I don't like to think of the nest as empty. I like to think of it as evolving. And that's one of the things I came to, and one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is simply so that we begin to look at this differently than we have in the past. So the empty nest, I'm hoping, is not empty.
Yes. Okay. Well, for some of us out here listening, our kids maybe have just graduated. Maybe they are about to come home. We've given a couple of scenarios. Let's talk about some of the different scenarios that this transitional period looks like for people, because you talk about in the book, which I thought was very interesting, because not everybody's married. Not everybody has just one kid. Maybe you have three. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios. Take us through a couple of the most common scenarios that people might find themselves in here.
Well, let's look at how I break down what happens, and that is the anticipation phase, the launching phase, and the resolution stage. So the first phase, the anticipation, that scenario would be very common for everybody because that usually happens in high school when your children are not wanting to hang out with you as much or having dinner or have their driver's license. You know, so they're off and about and beginning to spread their wings, and you're getting pangs of a little bit of like previews of what life is going to be like.
Yeah.
I see you shaking your head. You
Yeah. Well, I was remembering when our youngest got his driver's license, and when he drove himself to school for the first time in 16 years, I couldn't breathe. I stood sobbing in my robe. I can remember it, just conjuring the memory, and it took my breath away. I was absolutely, and I was astonished by that because I didn't think I would be one of these people that would get all weepy or emotional, you know, over something like that. So I felt like that was a peek for me into what was coming.
And absolutely it was, and I think it is for many of probably many of the listeners and many of my readers and many of the people I've worked with. And during that phase, there's a lot of ebbs and flows, so you kind of get used to them all of a sudden being a little more autonomous. But they start pushing the limits a little bit and maybe being a little messier than usual and a little grumpier than usual. And in some ways making it easier for us to say, oh, sayonara, you're going to be out the door soon.
Yeah.
And conversely, that, you know, you're going to miss some of those moments where, those wonderful moments that you want to freeze dry them and where you've connected with them and been so wonderful. So, in that anticipation phase, you can see the independence beginning to emerge, looking at schools, looking at complications. So that's a very evident, solid kind of way to look at it. The launching phase would be the phase, actually, when we help move them out. Hopefully it's to college, but if not, if they're doing something else in their life, traveling or going to the military or whatever, you're helping them with the next stage. So, with many of us with Lysol in hand and handy wipes to clean their rooms.
Sandblasters.
Yes, and a lot of Kleenex. We're armed with everything that we need,
Yes.
and we help feather their first little new nest.
Right.
And that would be the launching phase. And at that phase, we are kind of getting much more into the fact that, our job description is just about to change.
Yeah.
And we need to really look at what that's about. You look like you wanted to say something.
Well, actually, what I was thinking was that one of the things you talk about in your book, and if you're just joining us, Wendy's written a great new book, Wendy Aronsson, Refeathering the Empty Nest. I'm holding it up here. For those of you who are just about to go through what most of us refer to as the empty nest phase, you know, when the kids leave, I was thinking that I love the part in your book where you talk about how this is really not one event. Because so often, you know, we characterize things in our mind, or in the anticipation, we imagine there's going to be one day and this happens, and, you know, but it's really not like that. You talk about there is anticipation, there is a lot of little steps, and I was remembering for 2 weeks, I felt like I was inconsolable. I felt like someone died. Whereas my girlfriend, one of my other girlfriends, she was so relieved. She was like, oh my God, I've never been happier in some ways, you know. So everybody's very different. So I guess my point is it's very complex. And and you say this in the book, and each person will have their own experience, and you give us some great information to help us prepare for what kind of person we might be. And we're going to get to that a little bit later this hour. You know, what the different types of parents are, and maybe you might expect different experiences when your child leaves versus someone who is a helicopter parent, or, you know, you've got like 5 different descriptions that are very helpful that I really liked as well. So that's what I was thinking. Yeah. So go ahead, Wendy.
Okay, so with the launching, and that's really what you illustrate there, and what you say there is so important, is that every case is different. It is not like turning on and off a light switch.
Right.
You know, when you say goodbye, goodbye is so complex. And there is a loss involved in there. And there are so many, a myriad of feelings that one experiences. And between you and your girlfriend, actually, is a really good example of the extremes. And then there's everything in the middle.
Yeah.
Oh, there really just isn't one right way to feel. And as a psychotherapist, I believe that very deeply. As a person, I believe that. And I just think that's such a great point. So with the launching, that is a phase that's going to have, the actual launching of your young adults, I call them, and then helping them move on. And then you come back to beginning to examine your life, because your job description has now changed.
Yeah.
And that job description is obviously parent, front and center, but even if you've worked, that has been a major part of who you are and what you do. It really opens up a world of possibilities in terms of yourself, in terms of enriching yourself, time, and we're kind of progressing into the resolution stage as I speak.
Right. Well, let's back up a little bit, Wendy. Finish your thought, but we're going to back up in a second here and talk about the different ways that we approach parenting and so forth. But go ahead and finish your thought before we get there.
So in terms of the launching stage, finishing that up, really that's the beginning of taking a look at how you want your nest to be feathered. It doesn't mean you know how. It doesn't. You're just kind of playing around and flirting with some ideas as to what you think your life might look like. Right. And that's in the second phase. The third phase, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so when you set out to write the book, one of the things I was saying before we went on the air is I really appreciated all the research you did. You've really done your homework. You've canvassed other experts in the field. You actually set up a way for people to be interviewed. They took a survey. Your research extended to other interested laymen in the field, and your book contains a lot of that information, which I think is invaluable. So it wasn't just that you had your perspective. You really offer us a broad range of understanding from a myriad of different vantage points. And I think that's nice, because one thing might resonate with one person, and then you think, well, that doesn't really work for me. And a page later, you're filled with resonance. So I really appreciated about your book in particular.
Thank you.
Yeah, you betcha. So let's talk a little bit about some of that research, some of that data that you found. Right off the top, let's talk about the people that were polled, and across the board, who are the kinds of people that you reached out to get their feedback from, Wendy? And were you surprised by any of it?
I really wasn't, and the feedback were from people in the United States, and they were from a socioeconomic background, and all over, all in different areas of the United States, both rural, city, and everything in between.
Great. And so in terms of the kinds of parents, moving from, who you polled and the experts, we'll talk about some of the experts that you love their research and their, the data they bring to the table, including, attachment theory and all of those kinds of things. I love all that. Let's talk a little bit about the kinds of parents that people are categorized as. This might surprise some folks. You use the term helicopter parent, for example, which many folks are familiar with that term, but don't exactly know what you mean or know what that means. But you have 5 characterizations of types of parents. Lay those out for us.
Well, I want to first talk about the helicopter parent, because that is a really, really important part of the book. And the helicopter parent was a term that was coined in the 1980s. And these parents are parents who, just like helicopters, tend to hover over their children. They do for their children. They problem solve for their children. They are front and center in those children's lives, and they are absolutely operational. Comparatively, I think of I think of parents today as precision parents. And unlike helicopter parents, our style of parenting is mindful, is purposeful, is proactive. It's helping your children get tools to deal with their life and their development, but not giving them the answers, and helping them be the best that they can be. And I think these are two very, very distinct types of parenting. The other parenting that I talk about really in my book was really getting an idea of people, how, hands-on they were. And that is how I really looked at, how involved they were. Did they see themselves very involved, mildly involved, moderately involved?
Right. So you can fall into one of two camps as a parent. When we come back on MaryanneLive, we're going to find out, is there one type of parent that struggles more than others when the children leave, or is it really a surprise to you, the different kinds of reactions that you have when the children are gone? And then come home. We're going to talk about that too this hour right here on MaryanneLive. The boomerang effect. The free-range boomerang right here on MaryanneLive. We're going to be back in just a minute. Wendy Aronsson is joining us. Refeathering the Empty Nest right here on MaryanneLive. Don't touch that dial. For the rest of you, we will be streaming live through the break. You will have a behind-the-scenes look and listen with Wendy and I right here on MaryanneLive. Back in just a minute.
Back in 2.5.
Great. Thank you, Jay. Okay, Wendy, we've made some big, broad strokes talking about, just the concept itself. And, what I notice as I feel into this is it's interesting that this affects so many people on so many levels, parents in general. And yet, it's like, I don't want to say like death in the sense, but you do talk about that. You talk about the Kubler-Ross kind of grief process. And everybody is going to have their own experience. I know for me, I was really surprised by the deep, deep, inconsolable grief that I felt. I couldn't even function. I felt like I had no insides, that my insides were just emptied out, and I was just going to feel this way forever, I think was the most distressing part. And equally distressing is I wasn't prepared. I'd never talked about it. I didn't know what it meant. This term empty nester was not really one I'd heard about. Or if I did, I wasn't paying attention. I was too busy, as a lot of moms or parents are, running around checking off the next thing on your list. I think it's quite astonishing how, even though we have all this information available to us, how most of us are so immersed in survival or just getting the next thing done that these kinds of concepts really often come in hindsight, right? Except things like you said, what to expect when you're expecting that book. Everybody read it. I'm hoping that you're trying to campaign for empty nesters before they become empty nesters. I mean, I'm hoping that this book is about, right?
Really, really important. I'm very struck, actually, by you saying this is something that caught you so off guard.
Totally.
Because, it's funny, I do a parenting group, one of them that I do, with elementary school parents of elementary school.
Coming down?
Okay, hold that thought, Wendy. We're going to transition. You can finish your thought after the...
No problem. I don't have to.
Great. Okay. No. Welcome back, everybody. Wendy Aronsson's joining me. We are refeathering the empty nest. That's the title of Wendy's new book. We're talking about being empty nesters. Before we came back on the air, for those of you who are tuning in over the airwaves, Wendy and I were talking about how I was really shocked by my reaction to becoming an empty nester. I'd only heard the term maybe sort of in loose conversation over the years, but I really wasn't prepared. But then once I started feeling the way I was feeling, I started asking around. It was sort of like, oh, yeah, I went through that. And I thought, well, how come nobody's talking about this? My theory is that most of us who are very driven and trying to create a better life for our children, which we're going to talk about as well, the sort of the American dream baby boomers, right? We want our children to have all these opportunities, so we're not really sitting around contemplating our navels. We've got a long laundry list of stuff to do, and Wendy was talking, you were starting to talk a little bit about that surprised you, that I was surprised by my reaction. Say what you were going to say there.
I was struck. And I was struck because I was telling you a story about I work with the elementary school age moms, and you know, one minute they're talking about wanting to freeze dry their children, and the next minute they're beginning to feel sadness at where they are in their life and how much longer their children are going to be at home. And these are parents of 10, 9, 10 years old. So it is in, that's why I'm so surprised by this, because it really is it's in the air. There isn't a cocktail party or a dinner party or out for lunch that I don't hear people talking about, so what are you going to do when your nest is empty?
Yeah.
You know, and there's some people getting annoyed saying, my nest isn't empty. You know, everybody has all sorts of reactions.
Yes.
I think people, to what you were saying, people are very busy and are laser focused on their children. But I don't know that that precludes an awareness of what happens next. It really depends how you deal with the possibility of loss and the possibility of where you're going with change, how you are with change.
Right. So wherever you fall on the spectrum, if you're just joining us now, if you're somebody who's heard of this concept before, but you really haven't thought it through, what it means for you, or you could be a person who thinks, oh yeah, that'll happen for other people, which is probably what I was telling myself. I love my child, but he is autonomous. He is separate from me. When people used to pay me compliments, I'd be like, no, he's his own person. I did what I did because I wanted to do it, but you know, I just didn't. It really caught me off guard, and then everything in between. So, Wendy, let's talk a little bit about some of the greatest challenges that parents have when their child is about to leave or going to leave. It falls into a few categories, and you talk about this in your book.
Okay, well, again, the anticipation, back to that, one of the greatest challenges is because the children can get enormously difficult, and you, on the other hand, can get a little more critical and do things to push them away. And if you're the type who anticipates it with, oh my God, I don't know what life is going to be like, then really having a handle on your feelings and being aware of how you're feeling at that time is really imperative.
Okay, so I completely missed that. When I'd asked that before, I thought we were talking about something entirely different. So anticipation itself is a challenge. So I didn't put those two things together.
It can be. It doesn't mean it is.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a very emphatic, this is how it is.
Yeah.
I'm saying it can be a challenging time for both you and your child who's leaving.
Okay, so you're talking about the challenges in terms of phases. I got it. I see what was happening there.
What challenge were you making?
Yeah, no, I meant for example, my son stopped texting, letting me know where he was, over time. And you talk a little bit about this. You know, he started becoming not necessarily only argumentative, but more individuated, right? More emancipated. He was more free-thinking, more argumentative, things like that. You know, you alluded to that, but are these the universal challenges that people are going through? And is that doesn't strike me as anticipation as much as this is what kids do when they individuate, right? Like they're needing to create space, yeah?
I see it as both, actually. I see it as anticipation, but I also see it as a challenge because when you are faced with your child not texting you as much or not having the same kind of connection and knowledge about where they are and who they're with, you know, that's a challenge because you're left to think about, what can happen?
Right.
So in one way, that's a challenge, but in the other way, that is the anticipation phase because this is a peek at what it's going to be like when they're launched.
Right, got it. And let's talk about the money thing. This is another thing that I think is interesting. And depending on what kind of a neighborhood or socioeconomic place you find yourself in your life, all of a sudden, you know, my son was saying like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to live on my own. What am I supposed to do? No one's talking to me about this. I'm not going to be able to afford to, on and on and on. What are some of the challenges that other parents are facing around that? How does that show up for them?
Okay, so are you talking more about when they've graduated from college and they want to live on their own and they're unable to? Or are you talking about when they're in college?
I think maybe just money in general, pre-launch and post-launch. I mean, let's just run the gamut. We've done that with everything else, right? So the anticipation of leaving creates financial anxiety, right, for parents. What are you seeing? I'm not so interested in what I think. I'm interested in, like, what are you seeing as patterns with parents around their kids and money, pre and post?
All of them mostly scratch their head and think about how am I going to help my child learn to be independent financially.
Yeah.
So, it's depending on people's financial circumstances. If you are able to allow them to have a set allowance, that's usually a useful thing. Giving them a credit card so that they can spend from here to kingdom come is not so useful because I think it doesn't teach them anything. It doesn't teach them about budgeting. It doesn't teach them about taking responsibility and making choices. I can tell you a story about my son. My youngest one is a sophomore in college who said, oh, all my friends are going to this concert and it costs X dollars and I really want to go, but if I do that, I'm only going to have X amount of dollars left for the month. And we said, well, maybe you ought to think about that. And he said, well, what do you think? It's up to you. I said, no, it's not up to us. You have a certain amount of money, and if you only have a quarter of that left, think about how you're going to live. Oh, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, right?
It's those kind of life lessons that we really have to learn, and I mean as parents have to learn to do. And it's not easy. Even as a psychotherapist of 30 years, I'm constantly challenged.
Yeah. Well, I think you're bringing up something that you talk about at the beginning of your book, Wendy, which is just the post-World War parents, the very beginning of the baby boomers, and then as you progress through the baby boomer era, a lot of this talk for some people sounds like entitlement conversation. Most people, like my father said, it's my way or the highway, and then, nobody gave me a break. I'm not going to give, go figure it out, kid. Get a job. What are you looking at me for? Like, my husband's parents, it never came up. You want a car? What are you looking at me for? Like it was a very different time. And you talk about this in the book, that this intentional kind of parenting most of us have done, we almost feel like it's driving us into Al-Anon, because our kids, we've made them so dependent on us, they almost don't know how to figure things out. They're not very resourceful in some way. I'm hearing on the, word on the street. What do you think about that? What are your parents telling you?
It's a mixed bag. I think it depends on the child. It depends on the parents. And I think our job is to help them be resourceful. I think the time is different. So I think that's an important thing for us to take into consideration. But it's also important for us to remember one of our biggest jobs are to teach. And to teach our children and to teach them that when you fall, you wipe off your knees and you stand up, and we all fall and we all make mistakes and we all do stupid things, and we learn from it. So I think, money is it's a very touchy conversation with most parents and with most children. I think you bring up a really important point about the sense of entitlement. I think we have to be very careful whether we can. Just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a question I would hope your listeners would ask themselves real quickly, is to say, just because I can give Johnny an extra $50, is this a good thing to do? So really be mindful.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of bases, everybody. We're going to break. We're talking about the phases of moving out, the shift that happens when you have an empty nest situation pending, what happens pre and post. We've been talking about money, and we are going to talk about what happens when it's just you and your partner, or you, yourself, and yourself after your child leaves. We're going to be talking about that right here on MaryanneLive when we get back. Stay with us for those of you who are streaming live. For the rest of you, we'll be back right after these messages.
Right, back in 3.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, everybody. So, Wendy, let's talk a little bit about, one of the things that I'm very interested in is such a wide range within the scope of very involved parenting. This whole era of the baby boomers who, we could characterize the kind of parenting a lot of us do by saying things like, use your words. Most people understand what this means, where in my parents, their upbringing was like, you know what, the next sound you hear is your body dropping to the ground if you want to throw a punch at me, right? So there's a very different orientation to parenting now. We're very involved to varying degrees and so on and so forth. What do we think about how difficult this makes this for the way this one kind of parent, when it becomes an identity? We're so involved in parenting that you actually, it's an identity, and then your child leaves and you sort of feel like you're out of a job,
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
I do talk about that, and one of my ways that I talk with my patients about is looking at life as if it was a patchwork quilt. And if you've got that big patch that is your family, and let's say it's in the center of that quilt, you need to be able to find different fabrics of different textures and different colors in order to make that quilt complete. And that's a work in progress. Hopefully it's never finished.
Yeah.
I do think it's really, really important. This has been so much of our identity, but not always all of the identity. Some people have worked, some people have done volunteer, have hobbies that take up a lot of their time, but still so much of our self-esteem as people are reflected in how well our children are doing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot wrapped up in this.
Yeah, one of the themes that I really appreciate as I made my way through the book is the constant referencing to how this is not a static process, that this really is an ebb and flow, and on Tuesday you could be at each other's throats because you're transitioning, and Wednesday you're in a heap of tears, and then Friday you're like business as usual. And this is it feels like a kind of insanity, this separation process. But it brings up so much. It brings up, maybe even dredges up things about, I remember thinking, gosh, I didn't launch. I don't remember having a launch. No one had these conversations with me,
Coming back.
Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Maryanne Live. I'm Maryanne Comaroto. Joining us, Wendy Aronsson's new book, Refeathering the Empty Nest. Holding it up here for you. Get a copy. It's available wherever fine books are sold. Wendy, during the break, we were talking about, and for those of you joining us streaming live, you heard us talking about how, this is a very complex, a very complicated kind of situation. It's a process. It's not a one-step deal. All kinds of feelings will come up both for the children and the parents and so on and so forth. But I was saying how, I don't remember being launched. I don't remember my parents sitting down and talking to me about how to create a checking account or any of these things that we parents, most of us that I know of, go through to great lengths to try to help our children. What's with the big shift here? I know you talk about it in your book, but let's talk about that for a minute. Why us? Why our generation? Why are we so interested in the way that we parent versus the way our parents parented, for example?
Well, I really think it goes back to the precision parenting. I think we're older parents. We're older when we have our children. Many of us had careers or have careers, and there is so much information available to how to be a better parent, how to help your child with learning issues of asthma, diabetes. There's laser-like focus on parenting, and the literature out there is endless. Whereas the literature pre-World War II, there was Benjamin Spock.
Yeah.
And, so there was there were a couple of other.
Yeah. 3,
books.
you said.
Yeah.
Compared to 100,000 pieces of literature now, right?
There are so many.
Yeah.
And so many, it's not that more is better, it's just that there's so much out there. We know so much more about the development of a child, the development of self-esteem, and we as parents in our generation have really taken on the job of parenting as if, as I said, as if it were a career.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean we do it flawlessly, because we don't.
Right. Right, and that's okay, and that's why you wrote this book, because at any given stage, everybody, you can pick up this book and find where Wendy has investigated, done her research, she's done surveys and so forth, to get a finger on the pulse of what's really happening cross-culturally in terms of the different ways that we approach things that come up for us around empty nesting. One thing we haven't talked about yet is what happens when the nest is actually empty of the children, and you are looking at your partner, or potentially you are single, and suddenly there's a lot of space around you. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges that people face there, even the anticipatory parts of that. I mean, couples even break up, don't they?
Yeah, they sure do. Actually, the divorce rate rises quite a bit in the I would say the post-nest.
Yes.
The post-nesting years.
Yes.
And it rises a lot because there are, as the numbers indicate, people who stay together for, quote-unquote, the children. And not to say for those listeners who are in unhappy marriages that this is the right thing to do. There is not necessarily right, but that's more of a footnote at the moment.
Right.
So there are marriages who end up breaking up because they really just stay together for the children, or the focus was so children-focused that it did not allow them to nurture and take care of their marriage. Mm-hmm. Depending on how badly the cracks of the foundation of the marriage are, is whether it can be shored up and worked on, and it really has to have two people who really want to do that. That's a wonderful opportunity, having the nest, this time, to really regroup and really reprioritize your life. I often say that marriage takes a back seat when you have young children and children. It's time for the marriage to take the front seat and for you to really focus on, is this what you want for the next 30-plus years? Mm-hmm. That's one area. So the single parent, this is particularly challenging because so much of their focus has been work and their child or children, and that they themselves and their social life have oftentimes taken a backseat. Mm-hmm. So it can be a very scary time. All of a sudden, who am I besides, Johnny's mom and, an accountant? They oftentimes feel very vulnerable and very scared about what lies ahead, and feelings of loneliness and needing companionship. Mm-hmm. So that also can be challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got it. And so in terms of, again, going back to that this is sort of like a process, right? You talk about that in the book in terms of making the shift. Doesn't happen in one fell swoop, although some things arise and feel like that. The next day presents new challenges, and life does go on. But on that note, quite frankly, sometimes people get really used to this new space they have, and they, fill it with new things, new purpose, going back to school, all kinds of things. So on that note, let's talk about what happens when, here comes Johnny. He needs to move back home. The empty nest is now filled again. Now, this is a very interesting place for a lot of folks to be, and apparently it's happening more and more. Let's talk about that.
Yes, it is. We call that the Boomerang Generation, and these are the children who do come back after college because they haven't found a job or they're not able to have a job that allows them to live independently. So they are forced to come back home to a refeathered nest. And one really has to remember that the Johnny who left 4 years ago is a different Johnny who returns to you 4 years later. He's lived on his own. There's been a lot of things that have happened. Conversely, you are not the same mommy anymore. Yes. You're really more mom yes. and mother, and you've had your own life. And again, I go back to the nest not being empty, but you have refeathered it. The rooms may look different, and your rhythms are different, and you're found a new purpose or a passion. And all of a sudden, in comes Johnny, like an elephant, in a china shop.
Yeah.
And that begins a big challenge.
That's right. It's very interesting. I had to catch myself the other day asking my son, my 6'4", 22-year-old son, do you have a coat? He just shook his head and walked out the door. That's what I had to say about it. We'll be back right after these messages, all you moms and dads and people with a different looking nest. We're going to be right back right here on Maryanne Live. For the rest of you, stay with us. We're streaming live on MaryanneLive.com.
I had the same thing happen to me with my 25-year-old. My husband and I were driving into the city, and he had to meet us outside of his apartment, and it was freezing out. And my husband says, well, do you think he's going to put on a coat? And I said, do I what? I said, if he doesn't have a coat, he'll go inside and get it. I said, need your 25 years old. This is my husband.
That's hilarious. I love it. I really do. And, you know, one of the things we did that we thought was very clever was our son used to live upstairs when he was home. And we thought that this would help him launch as well. We moved his room. We traded it with a room downstairs. And he doesn't love it. And we both think that's good. He actually thinks that's good, too, that he doesn't love it. Because he doesn't really want to stay home. You know, it's like taking him to the next step of what it might feel like. Like, he knew how to live off campus, you know, and live in a house and share a roommate. But we wanted to keep that kind of trend going. Mm-hmm. So he's not so comfortable that, you know, he isn't fostering his independence, which is what he really wants. So that was helpful. I don't know if that's a trick that anybody else would be interested in, depending on what space you have to shift around. But I highly recommend that, you know, and not, one of the things is how much do we help them? And sometimes things that are uncomfortable are helpful. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, and I think it's a really good point and probably one that we should go into talking about, you know, how do you help them without making it so attractive that they never want to leave.
Yeah.
Which is not our job.
Right.
Our job is to make sure they do want to leave, and their job is to leave.
Yes. Well, we had a little graduation celebration, and one of my girlfriends said, well, what should I get him? And I looked at her, I said, a gas card. I mean, you know,
coming back to the left.
Practical. All right. Thank you, Jay. All right, everybody, welcome back to Maryanne Live. I'm Maryanne Comaroto. We're in the house with Wendy Aronsson. She's written Refeathering the Empty Nest. It's a great little Bible filled with all kinds of statistics and support, taking you through from the very anticipation of having your young ones, now grown-ups, go off into the world, and all the way through to being single or in a relationship that you haven't been alone in for a long time, through issues around money, the kinds of parenting issues, the emotional issues that will come up. We've covered all of that this hour. And we find ourselves at this place, Wendy, we were talking during the break, you know, when they do come back home, because sometimes they do this boomerang situation, it's a little cranky. It's cranky. You know, we've kind of gotten used to them being gone. We're super happy they're back. They're kind of happy to be back, but not. So it's this sort of cranky period. And we were saying during the break, you know, we don't want to make it so comfortable that they never leave, because that's just not healthy for them or us. Let's talk a little bit about that. You know, how do we help them launch? And this is a time that's a little bit tense at home.
Yes, and initially you can have what is the honeymoon period. You're glad they're back, everything's wonderful, it's great. But with that, you have had a new refeathered nest, you have a new rhythm, everything has been your way or your spouse's way for 4 years. Now all of a sudden they're back in, which is where we started. So helping them, keeping communication, number one. If there is anything of a recipe that I would give you, it would be keep your mouth open, be clear about your expectations. Well, wait, don't keep your mouth open always, because this is time to keep it shut.
Yes,
but no, in other words, be clear about your expectations. What does that mean? Do you expect Johnny to help around the house? Do you expect him to pay rent? Is he in the same room as his room? Is he coming back to the same room? What are the expectations about him being out all night and coming home? So really being clear as parents what you would like life to look like. Since your nest has been refeathered, he is the guest, and it's important, even though we want them to feel like there's always a place for them and that is their home, but their home is not the same home they left.
Right, exactly. When my son came home, we were talking about, my goodness, he's for 4 years been the pedal to the metal. He was tired, and we talked about, hey, you know, how about a little time off? I know that we've got jobs looming and all that, but we were really clear. And he's taking a little, very specific period of time as a vacation for himself, and that was helpful. You know, so he doesn't feel guilty about it. So he can really, you know, we negotiated that. And then I think parents might talk about, well, you know, how long do you expect it will take to get a job? Sometimes it could take up to a year. You know, these are things that I'm hearing you say. Let's continue talking about it, make little markers, right? We'll revisit this in 6 weeks or 90 days, something like that.
That is perfect, the way you put that. Really being clear, having a time frame. You know, how long do you expect it? I love your idea that you said, look, you've put the pedal to the metal, you've worked hard, you're entitled to time off. Yes, entitled.
Yes.
So that this is what we as your mom and dad are comfortable with. What do you think? So there was a dialogue,
right,
and there are clear expectations.
Right.
Challenge is that, let's say Johnny's taken his month off and, you know, gotten quite used to it, and let's say we're going a month and 2 days, a month and 3 days. As parents, your challenge is to have that discussion again front and center, and have parameters that are very clear for you and Johnny.
Yeah, that's rough, and boy, is it necessary, because you start to get resentful, things get tense, you can feel it, and you're not comfortable in your own home, and that's just a horrible feeling. And it's better off, I call it front loading, better to just say it, get it on the table, try to do so, say what you need to say, with as graceful and loving as you can, and also giving room for the kids, you know, to say what they need to say. You know, they're frightened and don't exactly know where to make the first brush stroke oftentimes. And that's, you know, let's leave on the note. Give us, as we come to the top of the hour, Wendy, 3 things for sure that you want us to walk away with. And in the realm of the Boomerang kids, what's something that we could practice right off the top of the bat here, for sure?
Well, let's start with what I said, communication. First and foremost, be very clear about what it is, how you want this nest, your nest, to look like during the time that your Boomerang child has returned.
Beautiful. So we're working backwards, and now we would be at the actual launch. What do we want people to know about people who are really, the kids are just launching now? Best advice.
Oh, best advice is be aware that you are in for a roller coaster ride, that there is no normal, there's no typical, that you're going to have a myriad of feelings, and they're okay.
Beautiful. And the anticipatory folks, the ones that are looking at, it's coming, it's not here yet, things are getting cranky around the house, you're already feeling, you don't know what's coming down the road. Best advice for folks in the anticipation phase.
Expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
And so by that, you know, you're kind of winging it. And try to be as aware as possible of the different previews, just like you spoke about, like the driver's license. Be as aware as you can about these different ways of separating in small ways, because if you build them up together, it will help you with the separation and your child with the separation during the launching phase.
One thing I'd love to just point out as we do come to the top of the hour, Wendy, that I really appreciate, and about your dedication and work in the world, is, you know, the cognitive approach to healing is so important, and the emotional aspects are equally important. And we oftentimes climb over that. Let yourself have a good cry. Find someone to talk to. This too shall pass. It will move through you like a wave. And I always love to invite people, moms and dads alike together as a family. Go ahead and let the feelings up and out. I think this is a critical piece that we try to be so tidy in our minds and our approach to life, and it's messy. This is a messy process, wouldn't you say, Wendy?
I sure would. It's complicated. It's a little bit like peeling an onion.
Yeah.
There are many different people and versions out there as there are blades of grass.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, everybody, we're going to come back for our wrap right here on Maryanne Live. Don't make me cry. We're going to be right back right after these messages. Don't touch that dial.
All right, back into the wrap-up.
Thank you. All right, Wendy. Well, what a treat. Love your expertise here. Absolutely. I hope you do very well with your book and getting it out there. You on book tour now?
I am doing some right now, just a lot. I was just on Katie, and so I've been on some things. This has been a journey. It's been a birth for me.
Fun.
So it's really been fun. I kind of pinch myself because I love my therapy practice, but this is kind of stretching myself in a different way.
Oh, good. Well, you wear it well, and you have a great presentation and a lot of fabulous information for folks. I think you're touching on something really important.
Well, thank you, and it really has been a pleasure being on here, and I'm happy. You can call on me anytime.
Oh, we will do, as a matter of fact. I like to drill down to the subjects, the kind of the stuff that no one really talks about.
Oh, I can talk about anything.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we might have you back, I'd be interested in talking about, is the kind of the deep and dark grieving that people don't talk about when we do get identified as parents. That can trigger a lot of things, can trigger your own childhood. I think that's the least talked about aspect of this issue. A lot of people start medication, they go back to therapy, and they feel so filled with shame. So we'd love to have you back and maybe talk some about that and take some listener questions.
It'd be my pleasure.
Okay, great. Well, you stay in touch with us, please.
Thank you.
Oh,
Same with me.
Oh, absolutely, we will.
It's a delight. And how long have you been doing this?
7 years.
We're coming back for the wrap-up.
Yes. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Wendy Aronsson in the house, refeathering the empty nest. All you free-range parents out there, not to worry, says Wendy. Pick up a copy of her book. Great advice, lots of support. And Wendy, it's been such a treat to have you on the program. We hope you'll come back and join us next time on Maryanne Live.
Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Beautiful. And everybody, next week, Jennifer Loudon, The Life Organizer, A Woman's Guide to a Mindful Year. We love Jennifer. We're happy to have her on the program. And for more information, go to MaryanneLive.com. Stay in touch with us. Sign up for our newsletter so you know who's on deck and how we can support you, helping you attract and create healthy, fulfilling, sustainable relationships, starting with yourself, right here on Maryanne Live. See you next time, everybody. Blessings. Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome.